Keisha Davis is a black waitress in a small town filled with cold, harsh prejudices. Every day, she endures the scrutinizing gazes and whispers of the white customers, especially from her manager, Walter Harris, a man steeped in disdain and bigotry. But amidst this suffocating atmosphere, Keisha quietly nurtures a spirit of kindness, secretly serving a silent boy his breakfast every morning. Little did anyone know one day her silent acts of kindness would strike a blow at the cruel, hypocritical faces of those who believed they were above it all. That October morning started just like any other, except when the door of Rosie's diner opened with the first chilling gust of fall, Keisha noticed a small figure quietly slipping into the corner of the diner. Her eyes instinctively locked onto the boy, a thin, pale-skinned child with messy blonde hair, his shoulders trembling under a thin coat that offered no warmth in the cold. Immediately, a strange, unnameable feeling washed over her. A sensation as if an old, forgotten memory of her own lonely past had been awakened. The boy chose a small table in the farthest corner, the one least noticed by anyone, and sat down quietly, placing his oversized backpack beside him. When Keisha gently approached, he glanced up for a brief moment before quickly lowering his gaze, as though afraid that holding her gaze would reveal something he wanted to keep hidden. "Good morning. What would you like to order?" Keisha asked softly, trying to create as comfortable an atmosphere as she could. "Just a glass of water," the boy answered quickly, his voice so soft it was nearly inaudible. Keisha nodded, feeling a pang of sympathy as she noticed the unease and hesitation in his eyes. Throughout that morning, she observed Adam sitting motionless, his eyes fixed intently on an old book laid out before him. Occasionally, he glanced around the diner, his gaze full of caution and wariness, a look Keisha knew all too well. The following day, and each day after, Adam returned at the same time, always at that same table, always ordering just a glass of water, never asking for anything more. What struck Keisha most was the hunger in his eyes, a hunger so familiar to her, one she had felt deeply in her own childhood. Not just a physical hunger, but a hunger for acceptance, for safety, and for not being judged. She quietly watched Adam day after day. Every morning he appeared at the same time, always silent, always alone, his small shoulders never once standing confidently. Keisha could sense that something had happened in Adam's life, something that made him shrink back like a frightened bird, wary of the judgmental eyes of those around him. Other customers in the diner began to notice Adam's strange presence. One of them was Walter Harris, the manager of Rosie's diner. Walter was a tall, middle-aged man with a permanent frown, his face always scowling, and he had treated Keisha with disdain ever since she started working there. He often muttered unkind words whenever he passed Adam, his gaze filled with suspicion and contempt. "Another freeloader showing up here?" he grumbled once. "This place isn't a charity for anyone to just sit around all day." On another occasion, Walter intentionally raised his voice as Adam left the diner. Thought it was just black folks who were always looking for free handouts, but now even those poor white kids are catching on. Keisha heard each cruel word clearly. She saw the sneering smiles on the faces of a few regular customers who laughed along with Walter's joke. Each word felt like an invisible knife piercing her heart, and she knew Adam felt the cold, harsh sting of those words too. But the boy said nothing. He just lowered his head and quickly left, as though trying to escape the cruel words as fast as possible. It was in that moment that a fierce determination rose in Keisha. She couldn't let this boy endure the same hurts she had endured in her own childhood. She couldn't let Adam feel that the world was nothing but cold and indifferent. Keisha decided she had to do something. Something small enough that no one would notice, but strong enough to help Adam believe that in this place, there was still a little warmth waiting just for him. The next day, when Adam entered the diner, he went to his usual table in the corner, ordering the usual glass of water. But when Keisha brought the drink to him, she placed a plate of warm pancakes with a little sweet syrup beside it, saying gently, "The kitchen made a mistake with the order. Instead of throwing it away, I thought you might like to give it a try. Consider it my treat." Adam looked up, his eyes filled with surprise and confusion. A fierce battle seemed to take place in his gaze, between his pride and the crushing hunger that tormented him each day. Keisha gently patted his shoulder before turning quickly, deliberately not giving him the chance to refuse. From behind the counter she quietly watched Adam. At first, he hesitated, but after a moment hunger won. Adam ate quickly, as though afraid that if he slowed down the food would vanish forever. In that moment, Keisha felt her heart warm just a little, but at the same time she could clearly feel a cold, piercing gaze on her from the office. Walter Harris's angry, scrutinizing, and suspicious stare. Keisha knew that her small act of kindness had unknowingly crossed a line Walter had drawn. But she didn't regret it, because she understood that just a small gesture of kindness could completely change Adam's life. What she didn't know was that her quiet kindness was also slowly changing her own fate in ways she could never have imagined. Since that day, a silent ritual began to form between Keisha and Adam every morning. Adam still sat at the same small table in the corner, always ordering just a glass of water, and Keisha still pretended to accidentally bring him hot, delicious meals. Sometimes it was a plate of fragrant pancakes, other times it was buttered honey toast, or occasionally a warm bowl of oatmeal when the weather grew cold. Each time, Keisha would sigh dramatically and say softly, with a tone full of sympathy, "Oh, the kitchen messed up the order again. Would you help me finish it so it doesn't go to waste?" Adam never replied, but the initial wariness gradually faded. He began looking at her with a different expression, one of quiet gratitude, deeper than any words of thanks could ever convey. Occasionally, their eyes would meet for a brief moment, but it was enough for Keisha to understand that her small act of kindness truly mattered to him. However, not everyone saw the goodness behind these actions. Walter Harris, the manager of Rosie's Diner, began to closely watch every move Keisha made. He always found ways to keep an eye on her from behind the counter, his cold, skeptical gaze like he was waiting for an opportunity to expose what he considered Keisha's exploitation of the diner's goodwill. One morning, after Adam left the diner, Walter suddenly called Keisha into the small office at the back, slamming the door shut with an air of menace. "I've seen it all, Keisha," he said coldly, his arms crossed, his eyes sharp as knives staring at her. "You think this is a charity? I don't pay you to give food away for free." "I understand, Mr. Harris," Keisha responded gently, trying to keep her voice calm. "But it's just leftover food from the kitchen." Walter sneered mockingly. "Don't think I'm stupid. You think I don't know your little game? Someone like you must be trying to prove something to us white folks, huh?" Those words hit Keisha hard, like a blow to her pride. She stayed silent for a moment, then lifted her head, her gaze firm but calm. "Sir, I'm not trying to prove anything. I just don't want to see that boy go hungry." Walter scowled, irritated by her strangely calm attitude. He stepped closer, lowering his voice in a threatening tone. "If you keep this up, I'll dock it from your wages. You'd better watch yourself." Keisha nodded lightly, not arguing further. She knew explaining would be pointless, for Walter's prejudice was too deep, too heavy for him to see the good behind her actions. From that day forward, Keisha decided to quietly use the meager tips she earned to pay for Adam's meals. She accepted giving up essential personal items, new winter clothes, and even a long-overdue dentist appointment, all just to ensure Adam had a full stomach each morning. As time passed, Adam became more accustomed to this quiet care. He no longer shivered when entering the diner, no longer tensed up under the scrutinizing gazes of the other customers. But they still never spoke, only silently understanding each other through fleeting looks of gratitude. However, Keisha's silent kindness did not go unnoticed by everyone. Some of the regular customers began to notice and gossip among themselves with mocking words. One time, while Keisha was preparing drinks behind the counter, she overheard Jim Turner, a frequent customer, saying to his friend, "Look at that. Now anyone can eat for free, huh? The times really have changed." His condescending remark was made intentionally loud enough for Keisha to hear. The people around them chuckled in agreement. Keisha swallowed the lump in her throat, continuing her work as if she hadn't heard a thing. She reminded herself to stay strong, to be patient, because she knew better than anyone how horrible that feeling of hunger could be. But what Keisha didn't expect was that Adam seemed to have noticed the gossip and judgmental stares as well. He began showing up less often, sometimes missing a few days at a time, and each time he returned, he seemed even more withdrawn, more cautious than before. This weighed heavily on Keisha's heart. She worried that her kindness might have inadvertently made Adam the target of those cruel words. What she didn't know was that outside the small door of Rosie's diner, in his cold home, Adam would sit quietly every evening, remembering the warm meals she had served him. Even though the malicious words hurt him, Keisha's sincere, silent care was the only thing helping him hold on to the belief that there was still real kindness in the world, a kindness that was unconditional, non-judgmental, and strong enough to rise above all the prejudices and darkness in life. The whispers about Keisha's kindness were no longer confined to quiet murmurs. Now they had turned into openly mocking comments, increasingly sharp and malicious every time she brought food to Adam. The initial suspicion had transformed into deep prejudice, and her simple kindness was now twisted and scrutinized by the skeptical gazes of the entire community. One cold morning, as Keisha placed a steaming plate of toast on Adam's table, a mocking voice from behind rang out clearly enough for the entire diner to hear. "Here she goes again. A poor black woman playing charity. How ridiculous." Keisha tried to keep her composure, but the words cut deep into her already bruised sense of self-worth. Without turning around, she glanced toward Adam and saw him with his head down, his small hands gripping the silver spoon so tightly that his knuckles turned white. A surge of anger mixed with pain rose in Keisha, but she remained silent, quickly walking toward the counter, struggling to hold back her tears. But the harsh words didn't stop there. Across the room, an elderly woman, Margaret Evans, who always prided herself on her long-standing family roots in town, stirred her coffee and mockingly said to the friend sitting across from her, "Is she doing this just to please the white folks? I don't know why Walter would hire someone like her." A small, approving laugh followed her words, making the air in the diner feel suddenly stifling. Keisha tried to pretend she hadn't heard, her hands trembling as she wiped the glass she had just washed, but her heart ached to the point of suffocation. A few minutes later, Walter Harris stormed out of his office, his face flushed with anger. He walked directly toward Keisha, stopping right in front of her, his voice sharp and cold as ice. "Keisha, get to my office now." All eyes in the diner turned toward her, and the whispers began again. Keisha gently placed the cloth down, her heart pounding as she walked into the back office with a heavy sense of dread. Walter slammed the door behind her with a thud, then glared at her with disdain. "I warned you, Keisha, but it seems you didn't get the message, did you?" he said, his arms crossed and his eyes piercing. Keisha swallowed hard, doing her best to keep her voice steady. "Mr. Harris, I just wanted to help the boy. I'll pay for the food myself. I won't take anything for free from the diner." Walter scoffed, his eyes sharp enough to cut through her dignity. "You're going to pay? With what? Your tips? Do you think your tips are enough to cover your bills or rent? Or are you planning to beg some of these customers for more? Stop pretending to be a saint. You're just trying to draw attention." Keisha trembled with anger, but she held her ground, looking Walter straight in the eye. "You can think whatever you want about me, but I haven't done anything wrong. If helping that boy bothers you so much, I'll take care of it on my own." Walter curled his lips in contempt, his attitude dripping with scorn. "We'll see how long you can keep this up, but let me warn you, if this happens again and the diner suffers any loss, I won't hesitate to fire you on the spot. Got it?" "I understand, sir," Keisha replied softly, her voice filled with quiet resolve. She returned to the counter, trying to maintain the most composed expression she could. Outside, the customers continued to gossip, eyeing her with judgment as though she were a stranger, a suspicious exploiter. Even some of the regulars purposely avoided making eye contact with her, as if her kindness had now become something shameful. Amidst this storm of prejudice, only Adam continued to maintain his unwavering trust in her. Every morning, he still appeared in the corner of the diner, his once clear eyes now becoming warmer and more familiar when he saw her, as if he wanted to reassure Keisha that everything she was doing was worth it. Keisha decided not to back down. She would continue to silently help Adam, no matter how much disdain, hurt, or insults she had to endure. Because in her heart, kindness was not something to be measured by money, skin color, or the skeptical stares of others. It was simply the right thing to do, the only good thing in a world full of shadows and prejudice. Despite the harsh words and suspicious attitude from Walter still echoing in her mind, Keisha had never intended to give up. The next morning, as the autumn sky remained gray and cold, she walked into Rosie's diner with a steely resolve, silently preparing Adam's breakfast as usual. But this time, she knew exactly what she had to do. There was no room for fear or hesitation anymore. As she placed the steaming plate of pancakes on Adam's table, Keisha quietly glanced toward the manager's office. As expected, she caught Walter's gaze, filled with suspicion, watching her through the frosted glass. He stood there, arms crossed, his face contorted with doubt, clearly waiting for the slightest mistake from her to pounce on. Keisha sighed softly, turned back to smile gently at Adam, then quickly returned to the counter. Later that morning, after Adam had left the diner, Walter approached Keisha, clearing his throat loudly to draw the attention of the remaining customers. "I see you're still persistent with your little charity act, Keisha. But this time, where are you getting the money to pay for it?" Keisha looked up, meeting Walter's challenging gaze, her voice soft but firm. "I've already told you, Mr. Harris. I'll use my meager tips to pay for all the meals, and I'll keep doing so until that boy no longer needs it." Walter smirked, deliberately speaking louder so the customers in the diner could hear. "Oh, you really are quite the saint, aren't you? Or maybe you're using this to draw attention to yourself. Fine. Let's see how long you can keep this up with your tiny tips." The mocking laughter of a few customers filled the diner, and Keisha felt as if an invisible hand was squeezing her heart. But she didn't react, silently looking down at the order book in her hands. She knew that any explanation at this point would be pointless. Over the following days, every morning when preparing Adam's meal, Keisha could feel Walter's watchful eyes following her every move. He kept appearing unexpectedly behind her, checking the books, deliberately asking loud questions about payments to put pressure on her. Keisha, "Are you sure you've charged that kid for the pancakes? I don't want to have to check it again." Each time, Keisha calmly handed Walter the receipt for him to inspect, though his eyes clearly searched for something wrong. Walter was disappointed when he found nothing, but he still didn't stop. His scrutinizing attitude and doubtful gaze weighed on Keisha's shoulders like an invisible burden every day. It wasn't just Walter. The regular customers started to join in on the cruel game. The suspicious glances, the malicious whispers grew louder with each passing day. One day, as Keisha was serving, Mrs. Margaret Evans deliberately spoke louder than usual. "I wonder how long she'll keep this up with her cheap little sympathy act. Probably won't be long before she's asking for welfare." The small chuckles from the surrounding customers filled the air with sarcasm. Keisha felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger, but she swallowed her tears and continued her work as if she hadn't heard a thing. Still, Keisha's determination never wavered. She began carefully recording every tip she earned, calculating the exact amount to ensure she could pay for Adam's meals. She even had to sacrifice her basic personal needs. No new clothes, skipping nutritious meals for herself. On the evenings after work, Keisha would sit alone in her small apartment, quietly counting the little money in an old metal box, but she had never regretted it. Gradually, even Walter noticed he couldn't accuse Keisha of dishonesty or stealing from the diner. But he continued his attacks with cruel words and insinuations. One time, as Walter passed by Adam's table, he deliberately spoke loudly enough for Keisha to hear. "Getting used to free meals, huh? Must be nice to be pitied by others, kid." Adam remained silent, his head lowered even more, his face red with embarrassment. Keisha's heart ached when she saw this, but she simply clenched her fists and continued serving the other customers in silence. Amid all the pressure and bitterness, there was one thing that kept Keisha standing strong. It was the grateful, trusting gaze that Adam gave her every time he saw her bringing food to his table. That look gave her strength, making her realize that what she was doing was right and worthy of every sacrifice. Keisha knew that unconditional kindness always came with challenges and pain, but she was determined not to let anyone or anything make her waver. She would continue to fight silently because, for Keisha, helping Adam was not just about fighting hunger. It was the strongest act of resistance against all the injustice and prejudice surrounding her. The cold, early November mornings passed with an increasing sense of tension and exhaustion, but Keisha remained steadfast in her belief, seeing Adam's regular appearances as the only anchor to face the cruelty around her. So, when one morning the familiar small table in the corner remained empty, her heart sank. At first, Keisha reassured herself that perhaps Adam was just running late or had an unexpected commitment, but day after day the table remained vacant, like a haunting silence in the already painful life she led. Each time the bell above the door rang, Keisha would turn quickly, hoping to see the familiar small figure of Adam, but once again she was met with disappointment. A week passed in that emptiness, filled with anxiety. Keisha tried to stay calm, but she couldn't help but fear the worst for the boy. What hurt her the most was that Adam's sudden disappearance not only worried her, but also became the perfect excuse for those who already disliked her to intensify their attacks. Not long after, local social media began to feature malicious posts targeting Keisha. One afternoon, while resting after her shift, she accidentally opened her phone and froze when she saw a series of posts from a group of town residents. They used the very image of the empty table, where she had prepared food for Adam every morning, to mock her cruelly. "Look, everyone. Here's the famous charity show by Keisha Davis, a black woman trying to prove she's noble with cheap tricks. She thinks that by handing out a few free meals, the townspeople will forget who she really is. What a foolish dream." Keisha felt her heart constrict with pain. But what hurt even more were the spiteful comments beneath those posts. Sharp, venomous racial slurs, more vicious than ever before. Black women just like to show off. She's probably trying to manipulate the sympathy of the white community. Someone like her doesn't have money for charity. Maybe she's planning to steal from the diner. Each word was like a knife wound. Each sentence seemed to completely negate all the good she had tried to do with sincere intentions. Keisha felt utterly drained, but she couldn't cry. Her tears had long since run dry after so many times swallowing the pain life threw her way. Even Walter Harris didn't miss the chance to continue attacking Keisha. He repeatedly brought up Adam's story with a mocking tone, full of self-satisfaction. "I told you, this scam wouldn't last forever. That kid is definitely tired of her fake charity. Sooner or later, she'll reveal her true face." Small laughs echoed around the diner every time Walter finished his malicious words. Keisha could only lower her head in silence, continuing her work with a heart growing heavier by the day. During the long days without news of Adam, Keisha felt like the whole world was turning its back on her. Even the customers who had once been polite began to grow distant, more wary. They looked at her with a different gaze, one that Keisha knew all too well, a look of suspicion and coldness. The rumors continued to spread, creating an invisible rift that grew larger between her and those around her. But deep within her heart, Keisha never lost hope. She continued to silently prepare breakfast for Adam each day, still placing a small plate on the empty table as a reminder that she believed he would return, even if it was only a faint hope. One cold morning, as she was cleaning the dining tables, Keisha accidentally overheard Walter whispering maliciously to a regular customer. "She's still at it, setting food on that table every day as if the kid's going to come back. Really persistent, isn't she?" Keisha clenched her fists, trying her best to ignore the hurtful words. But the pain and loneliness were slowly wearing her down, leaving her feeling utterly drained. The only question that echoed in her mind, never fading, was, "Adam, where are you?" She didn't know that Adam's sudden disappearance was the beginning of a much more heartbreaking truth, and that the unconditional kindness she had shown him, no matter how misunderstood and insulted, would eventually be the bright light that shattered all prejudices and forced the malicious to bow their heads in shame. The gossip and suspicious looks continued to cling to Keisha like a relentless ghost, making each passing day heavier. Adam no longer appeared, and the small, familiar table in the corner of the diner now stood empty, a painful reminder that all her efforts seemed meaningless. Doubts began to creep into her mind. Was everything she had done truly worth it, or was she just unknowingly causing more harm to herself and Adam? That evening, when the night had fallen and the streetlights cast a dim glow into her small, dark room, Keisha sat curled up in the corner of her bed, her heart aching to the point of suffocation. Before her was the dimly lit screen of her phone, still displaying the cruel and racist comments that pierced her soul like needles, slowly draining away every last ounce of strength she had left. In the midst of her despair, Keisha's eyes were drawn to the small metal box placed beside her old bed. It was the box that held the few rare memories of her father, Robert Davis, a black veteran who had dedicated his life to defending the values he believed in. With trembling hands, Keisha opened the box, revealing her father's well-worn journal, its edges frayed, but the words inside clear and powerful. She flipped through the pages, her heart tightening as the memories flooded back. On one page, she stopped and read with rapt attention the words her father had written during his time in the military. "Today, I witnessed something that broke my heart. A white comrade of mine was severely injured, but no one wanted to help him because of their hatred for his skin color. I decided to step forward and protect him, to care for him. They called me a fool for doing so, but there's one thing no one can change. Kindness is the one thing that is not divided by skin color. Each word pierced Keisha's heart, and her father's voice seemed to echo in her ears, clear as if he were still beside her. Daughter, never let anyone make you doubt the goodness in your heart, for when you lose faith in kindness, that is when you have let prejudice win. Tears streamed down Keisha's face, falling onto the yellowed pages of the journal. But these were no longer tears of sorrow or despair. They were tears of awakening, of the powerful belief that had been reborn within her. She realized that no matter how maliciously the world spoke, it could not strip away the true value of her kind actions. And it was the unconditional kindness her father had always taught her that was the most important thing. In that moment, Keisha made a decision. She would not let anyone destroy the kindness in her heart. The next morning, she woke earlier than usual and walked into Rosie's diner with a newfound strength and determination. Though she knew Adam might never return, she still prepared his familiar meal with care, placing it on the empty table as a proud declaration. All eyes in the diner were still fixed on her, and the mocking whispers continued. Even Walter walked over, looking at her with derision. Still not giving up, huh, Keisha? Impressive. Or do you just enjoy humiliating yourself every day like this? Keisha looked up and met his gaze, her eyes strong and unwavering, making Walter take a small step back in surprise. Mr. Harris, you can think whatever you want about me, but I will not stop doing what's right. I believe in my kindness, and that will never change, no matter what you or anyone else says. Walter was taken aback by her resolute attitude. He hadn't expected someone like Keisha, who had always quietly endured, to speak with such strength and conviction. He cleared his throat, quickly turned, and walked away, clearly trying to hide his own discomfort. Keisha returned to her work, feeling a sense of lightness in her heart. The table remained empty, but she no longer looked at it with sorrow. Instead, she saw it as a symbol of her perseverance and faith. Each day, the meal placed on that table was not just for Adam. It was a powerful reminder to those who still harbored prejudice that true kindness cannot be stopped by any barrier, even those of bias and skin color. She knew that her battle with prejudice was far from over, and the road ahead would be long and difficult. But Keisha no longer feared, for inside her heart, her father's voice rang out clearly and powerfully, louder than ever. Kindness is the one thing that is not divided by skin color. The gloomy November days continued to pass quietly, and Keisha remained steadfast in her resolve, placing a meal every morning on the familiar empty table in the corner of the diner. But that morning, as she set the steaming plate of pancakes on the table as usual, a sudden sound shattered the usual quiet atmosphere at Rosie's diner. Outside the glass window, 4 sleek black SUVs with military plates suddenly stopped right in front of the diner. The air inside the diner seemed to freeze. Conversation ceased, and every eye turned to the window with a mix of tension and curiosity. From the first vehicle stepped a tall man in full military uniform, his posture straight and proud, with badges of honor gleaming on his chest. He walked directly into the diner, his sharp eyes scanning the room before settling on Keisha, who stood near the small table. The air grew thicker. The sound of leather shoes hitting the floor echoed in each person's chest like a drumbeat. "I am Colonel Michael Reeves from the United States Special Forces," the man's deep, commanding voice resonated. "I would like to speak with Ms. Keisha Davis." Keisha's heart raced, a mix of fear and curiosity rising within her. She slowly walked toward the officer, her hands trembling but trying to keep her voice steady. "That's me, Colonel." May I ask what this is about?" Colonel Reeves looked at her with a stern but respectful gaze, then gently pulled out a carefully folded envelope from his jacket pocket. "Miss Davis, I am here today because of a special promise. The boy you've been quietly caring for, Adam, is the son of Sergeant James Thompson, an outstanding soldier who recently lost his life in a special mission in Afghanistan." The entire diner fell silent. Regular customers, including Walter, were stunned by the unexpected truth. Walter stood frozen at the counter, his face turning pale as he realized the cruel words he had spoken before were now coming back to haunt him, exposing his cruelty to everyone. Colonel Reeves continued, his voice softer, but still clear with every word. "The saddest part is that Adam's mother left the moment his father went off on duty. During that time, Adam was left to live completely alone, surviving on the small savings his father had left. He didn't dare tell anyone because he feared being sent to an orphanage. In that desperate situation, you were the only one who quietly helped him without asking for anything in return." Keisha felt as though the world around her was spinning, her eyes blurred with tears of emotion. Now, the mocking, insulting, and cruel words she had endured seemed so insignificant compared to the truth she had just learned. Colonel Reeves opened the envelope, pulled out a carefully handwritten letter, and looked directly at Keisha, speaking with deep emotion. "Before he passed, Sergeant Thompson sent this letter asking us to find you. In the letter, he wrote, 'Please find the woman at Rosie's diner, the one who took care of my son while I couldn't be there. Please thank her for me. For she didn't just feed my son, she helped him keep his dignity and faith in life.'" The customers in the diner began to glance at each other with guilt and shame. The hushed whispers slowly faded away completely. Walter lowered his head, unable to look Keisha in the eye anymore. This truth was like a final verdict on the indifference, malice, and prejudice he and others had shown her. Keisha stood frozen, her heart both pained and touched. She gently took the letter from Colonel Reeves's hands, her own trembling with emotion. In that moment, all the hurt, suffering, and doubts she had endured seemed to become meaningless, leaving behind a clear affirmation that the unconditional kindness she had shown Adam truly mattered. Colonel Reeves bowed his head slightly, his voice full of respect. "On behalf of the United States Army and Sergeant Thompson's family, I offer our heartfelt gratitude to you. What you did for Adam was not just an act of kindness. It was a symbol of compassion that transcends all barriers and prejudices." After his words, all the soldiers who had been standing outside the SUVs stepped down and stood at attention in front of the diner, saluting Keisha with military precision. This gesture was not just an honor, but a powerful declaration that kindness and compassion would always rise above darkness, prejudice, and hatred. In that sacred moment, Keisha felt her heart begin to heal. The pain and suffering of the past seemed to dissolve, and she was left with a strong belief that no matter how harsh life may be, as long as she kept kindness in her heart, the light and justice would ultimately find their way to her. In the emotional atmosphere, Colonel Reeves gently placed the final letter from Sergeant James Thompson into Keisha's hands, a letter filled with the strong, resolute handwriting of a soldier from a distant battlefield, now forever unable to return. Keisha gazed at the letter, her heart moved deeply. In that moment, it felt as though the entire world outside Rosie's diner disappeared, leaving only the sound of her heartbeat pounding in her chest. Colonel Reeves's voice rose, solemn but filled with emotion. "Miss Davis, this is the letter that Sergeant Thompson wrote just before he sacrificed his life. He never knew your name, but to him, you were the one who preserved his son's dignity during the days he could not be there." Keisha trembled as she opened the letter, the words seeming to dance before her eyes. "Dear kind woman at Rosie's Diner, I do not know your name, nor have I ever met you, but in my mind you are an angel who protected my son from the harshest storms. When I learned that my wife left, leaving Adam all alone, my heart shattered. I had thought that no one would ever be willing to help a lonely child like Adam. But then Adam wrote to tell me about the woman who always pretended to bring the wrong food, quietly taking care of the boy without ever asking anything that would shame or hurt him. I know you must have endured much gossip, perhaps even cruel words for your kindness. But please know that your actions not only saved my son's life, but also saved the soul of a father who felt helpless in not being able to protect his child. I write this letter with a small hope that, if I cannot return, at least you will understand the endless gratitude I have for you. Your kindness has shown me that, amid the darkness and hatred, there is always the light of goodness, a light so strong that no prejudice or hatred can extinguish it. Thank you for being a pillar for Adam. I hope you always keep that kind heart and courage, for only people like you can change injustice in this world. With all my respect and deepest gratitude, Sergeant James Thompson." Reading the letter, Keisha could no longer hold back her tears. Her heart ached with the truth that the loving father had passed away forever, but she also felt a sense of relief. For finally, her quiet actions had been deeply understood and acknowledged. The entire diner fell into complete silence. The customers who had once been cruel now lowered their heads, and shame was evident on their faces. Even Walter Harris could no longer look Keisha in the eye. He stood motionless at the counter, his face pale, and for the first time he felt small and ashamed in front of the truth that had just been revealed. At that moment, Colonel Reeves stood tall, raising his hand in a military salute, a gesture of the highest respect for Keisha. Immediately, all the soldiers behind him followed suit, performing the military salute, a formal gesture rarely given to a civilian. This act left Keisha speechless. She had never imagined a day when she would receive such a powerful and moving honor. For Keisha, this was not just recognition for herself, but the strongest statement against all the prejudice, doubt, and cruelty she had endured. She looked at the soldiers in front of her, strangers who now felt strangely close, like brothers and comrades of her father, ready to stand up for the best values of humanity. Keisha bowed her head slightly, her voice choked but full of resolve. "I only did what anyone in my situation would have done, but today you have helped me understand that kindness, no matter how quietly it comes, will ultimately triumph. Thank you, Colonel. Thank you all for helping me restore my faith in the best things in life." After these words, the atmosphere in the diner remained silent, but this was no longer the heavy, suffocating silence it once was. It was a sacred silence, a moment when everyone reflected on themselves, questioning how they had treated the woman before them, who had silently endured all the hurt and cruelty just to protect the dignity and self-worth of a boy they had once ignored in their indifference. In that moment, Keisha knew that the fight against prejudice and injustice was still long, but she was no longer alone. Beside her now stood the power of truth and kindness, things that could never be defeated by any malice or doubt. The letter from Sergeant Thompson and the image of the formal salute from the soldiers remained deeply imprinted in the minds of everyone present at Rosie's Diner that day. As the SUVs gradually disappeared from view, the silence in the diner was replaced by a heavy sense of shame. One by one, the customers lowered their heads, drowning in guilt and regret for the thoughtless, hurtful words they had once directed at Keisha. The first person to approach her was Mrs. Margaret Evans, who had previously made cruel comments about her. Mrs. Evans stood in front of Keisha, her eyes full of remorse, her old hands tightly clutching a small napkin, her voice trembling with emotion. "Keisha, I'm so sorry. I truly apologize for the things I said before. I was blind, letting my ignorance hurt you. Please forgive me." Looking into Mrs. Evans' sincere eyes, Keisha smiled gently, a smile as warm as sunlight after a storm. "Mrs. Evans, I understand, and I don't hold it against you. What matters most is that now we both realize where we went wrong." After Mrs. Evans' apology, others stepped forward. Familiar faces Keisha had seen every day, people who had once cast suspicious glances and spoken harshly. Awkward, heartfelt apologies echoed through the diner, each word like a drop of soothing water, healing the deep wounds in Keisha's heart. Among those people, Walter Harris still stood silently in the corner of the counter, his face heavy with deep regret. Finally, he slowly made his way toward Keisha, each step slow and hesitant, as if struggling fiercely with himself. When he stood before her, Walter could not lift his head, his voice quiet to the point of almost whispering, I'm so sorry, Keisha. I've been terrible and indifferent toward you. I allowed my prejudices to blind me to your kindness and to my own dignity." Keisha stood still for a moment, then gently spoke, her eyes filled with compassion and understanding. "Thank you, Mr. Harris. We've all made mistakes, but what matters most is that we know how to correct them and change. I hope we can all do that together." Her words, filled with both forgiveness and strength, made Walter look up. For the first time, he met her gaze with an unprecedented respect. That moment marked the awakening not only of Walter, but of the entire small town that had once been shrouded in the darkness of prejudice. In the following days, Keisha's story quickly spread throughout the town. Every resident, young and old, heard of the quiet kindness of the woman they had once overlooked and hurt. This story sparked a deep wave of awakening in the town, making them look at themselves, reevaluating how they had unintentionally harmed innocent people simply because of their skin color or differences. Gradually, the cruel gossip faded completely, replaced by sincere conversations about forgiveness and mutual respect. Rosie's Diner became a new symbol for the town, a place where no one was judged by appearance or prejudice, but by the kindness and character inside each person. Walter Harris, once the embodiment of cruelty, became one of the most vocal opponents of racism in the town. One day, he hung a new sign in front of Rosie's Diner, with the clear message, "Rosie's Diner welcomes everyone, regardless of race, origin, or circumstance. Here, kindness and compassion are the only things that matter." That small sign quickly drew the attention of everyone. Local residents began to see Rosie's Diner as a symbol of the town's new awakening and compassion. They not only changed their attitudes but also actively opposed anyone who displayed even the slightest racist behavior. In community meetings or at other cafes in town, people spoke of Keisha with deep respect. She became a living symbol of a simple truth her father had once taught her. Kindness is the one thing not divided by skin color. Gradually, Keisha felt the wounds in her heart begin to heal, not only from the recognition she received, but from the strong belief that it was forgiveness and compassion that truly had the power to change the world around her. And deep in her heart, Keisha was certain that, although this small town had once been steeped in prejudice and hatred, thanks to this deeply humbling and sincere awakening, it would forever change, stepping into a brighter future where kindness and love would always prevail. The profound change in the town made Keisha's life much lighter, but in her heart, she still held a deep longing for Adam. She often wondered where the boy was now, whether he was happy and at peace. Then one cold winter afternoon, as snow fell, blanketing the familiar street, a letter was unexpectedly delivered to Rosie's diner, written in the familiar clumsy handwriting of a child. Keisha's heart raced as she opened the envelope, instantly recognizing Adam's handwriting, now neat and clear, as if the boy had regained a part of his faith in life. She slowly read each line of the letter, simple words but deeply moving. "Dear Miss Keisha, I'm living with my grandparents in Colorado now. It's really cold here, but I don't feel cold anymore because whenever I think of Rosie's Diner and you, I feel very warm. I've wanted to write to you for a long time, but I didn't know where to start. I've heard my grandparents tell me about what happened, about everything you had to endure just to help me every day. You know, when my mom left, I thought the whole world had turned its back on me. Every day at school, I felt invisible, just hoping the next morning would come so I could sit in the corner of Rosie's Diner, the place where I felt the safest. And you were the only one who didn't look at me as a poor, invisible kid, but as a real person. You once asked me what I wanted to order, but I only dared to ask for a glass of water. You understood what I couldn't say, and every day you quietly placed delicious meals in front of me. I know you didn't make a mistake. I know you did all of that just to protect my dignity. You never asked any questions, never made me feel ashamed or hurt. You simply were kind to me unconditionally. My dad used to say, heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear aprons. And now, I'm sure my dad was talking about you. You are the real hero in my life, even though you never called yourself that. Thank you for being the small light in my darkest days. I promise I will live well and strong, because I know that out there are people like you, people who are ready to love and help without expecting anything in return. I hope one day I'll be able to return to Rosie's Diner and see you again. But until then, I hope you stay healthy and happy. Adam Thompson. Keisha stood still, deeply moved by the letter. She couldn't stop the tears from falling, but they were no longer tears of sorrow. They were tears of profound joy. For the first time in her life, she realized that her seemingly small and invisible actions had truly changed someone's life. Adam's sincere and innocent words made her understand that all the hurt, the pressure, and even the cruel words she had endured were worth it. As long as a boy like Adam could see and appreciate these good deeds, everything she had done was worth every moment. Walter walked over to her, seeing the tears on her face. He stood in silence for a long time before gently speaking. Keisha, I was once a very thoughtless person. I never imagined that the small things you do every day could change someone's life so profoundly. I was wrong, completely wrong for treating you the way I did. Keisha smiled gently at him, her voice soft and deep. Mr. Harris, we all make mistakes. What matters is that we recognize them and change. I don't blame you. I just hope that you and everyone else understand that kindness, no matter how small, always has great power. Walter nodded, his face showing the first sincere smile, full of respect and admiration for Keisha. Now, he understood the true power of kindness, and it made him feel as though he had been born anew. Holding Adam's letter in her hands, Keisha felt a profound happiness fill her heart. She knew that, no matter how unfair and challenging life could be, as long as she kept faith in kindness and goodness in her heart, everything would eventually find its rightful place. She carefully folded the letter and placed it in her father's old journal. Now, Adam's words would lie right next to her father's most profound teachings, as a strong reminder that sometimes the only thing the world needs is the quiet kindness of those who never see themselves as heroes. In that moment, Keisha understood that her life had completely changed, and from now on, she would always remember one important thing. A true hero is not someone with superpowers, but someone willing to love and help others, no matter the prejudice or hardship, even if they're only wearing a simple apron. Since receiving Adam's heartfelt letter, Rosie's diner was no longer just a small diner. What Keisha had silently done and endured all this time had sparked a powerful transformation in the minds of everyone in town. The skeptical glances and cruel words that once rang out now completely vanished, replaced by deep respect and admiration for the woman who courageously overcame all prejudice and pain to protect kindness. But the most noticeable change probably came from Walter Harris, the man who had once been the embodiment of harshness and discrimination in the small town. In the days following all that had transpired, Walter seemed to be more thoughtful and quiet. He silently observed Keisha, watching how she still patiently and lovingly served each customer with a heart full of compassion and kindness. And then, on a cold, late winter morning, Walter did something no one in the diner could have ever imagined. He personally hung a new sign in front of the diner, with clearly painted letters on a light-colored wooden background. No matter who you are, where you come from, you will never leave here hungry. That simple yet meaningful sign immediately drew the attention of the entire town. People began flocking to Rosie's diner, not just to eat, but to witness firsthand the new symbol of compassion and equality. Walter stood quietly by the door, his eyes filled with pride as he looked at Keisha, who was busy serving the new customers, people who had never stepped foot in the diner before due to old prejudices. Soon after, Rosie's diner became the heart of the town. Customers of all ages came to the small diner, bringing with them words of encouragement, personal stories about their struggles against injustice and prejudice. They came not only to enjoy the food, but to show their strong support for Keisha and the humane message she had unknowingly created from her quiet kindness. One evening, Keisha was surprised when Walter approached her and began sharing his story with a group of new customers. His voice was deep but sincere. "I've been wrong before. I was thoughtless when looking at others through the lens of prejudice. But Keisha, the woman I treated so badly, has taught me an invaluable lesson. Kindness should never be limited by appearance or skin color." The customers listened attentively to Walter, and in their eyes was sincere respect for him, a man who had dared to confront his own mistakes and change so profoundly. Keisha stood from afar, witnessing it all, and for the first time she realized that the greatest force for changing people was not anger or blame, but true compassion from the heart. News of Rosie's diner spread quickly to neighboring towns, and many people traveled from afar to meet Keisha and Walter, to hear firsthand the inspiring story they had lived through. Each day that passed, the small diner became known not only for its delicious food, but also as a place where people came together to fight against all forms of racism and injustice. Some community groups even began organizing meetups at Rosie's diner to share the story and continue raising awareness about compassion and equality. Many local residents also began reflecting on their own behavior, rethinking how they had treated others, and gradually shifting towards more positive attitudes. One late evening, after the diner had closed, Walter approached Keisha, hesitating before speaking. "Thank you, Keisha. Because of you, I've realized that there are far more meaningful things in life than anything I ever pursued. Rosie's diner will always be a place where kindness is placed first." Keisha looked at Walter with gentle, understanding eyes. "We're all learning every day, Mr. Harris. What matters is that we never stop trying to be better than we were yesterday." Walter nodded slowly, his eyes now filled with trust and deep gratitude that he had never shown before. From that day on, Rosie's diner was no longer just a diner. It became a living symbol of the town, a place where outdated prejudices were erased, and a familiar destination where everyone could find true equality and love. And every day, as Keisha saw the diverse and different people walk through the doors of the diner, she knew that a small act of silent kindness had now become a much greater force, a force strong enough to change an entire community. As Rosie's Diner increasingly became a symbol of compassion and equality, Keisha's life gradually entered a new chapter, one that even she had never imagined. But the most surprising thing was still waiting for her ahead. One spring morning, when the first warm rays of sunshine gently touched the window of the diner, the door of Rosie's Diner opened, and Colonel Michael Reeves walked in once again, his serious but warm gaze instantly drawing all eyes in the diner toward the door. Keisha suddenly felt her heart race. She stepped out from behind the counter, smiling gently as she greeted him. "It's good to see you again, Colonel Reeves. Are you here for a meal today?" Colonel Reeves smiled kindly, shaking his head slightly. "I'm here today for a more special mission, Miss Davis." He walked closer to Keisha, and from the pocket of his formal military uniform, he carefully took out a small dark blue box with the United States military emblem delicately engraved on it. The entire diner fell into complete silence, every eye focused on his every movement. With a clear, formal voice but filled with emotion, Colonel Reeves spoke. "Miss Davis, I am here today on behalf of the United States Special Forces to offer you our deepest recognition and gratitude. The unconditional kindness you've shown to Adam Thompson has not only changed the life of a young boy, but it has also profoundly inspired all of us." As he spoke, he opened the box, revealing a special coin, a challenge coin, an honorary coin awarded only to those who have made significant contributions. Etched on it was the clear inscription, "Semper Memor," always remember. Keisha stood frozen, emotions welling up in her throat. She had never imagined that her small, quiet acts could be so deeply and nobly recognized. Tears of emotion once again rolled down her face. Colonel Reeves placed the coin into her hand and continued, his voice filled with respect. "This is not just a thank you from me or from Sergeant Thompson's family, but from all of us in the military. We will always remember people like you, unsung heroes who act without any desire for recognition, who have shown that true kindness is never limited by anything." The diner was filled with profound emotion. Walter stood still in the corner of the counter, his eyes glistening with tears for the first time as he witnessed Keisha, the woman he had once treated poorly, receive this special honor from the soldiers. He silently acknowledged that it was Keisha who had helped him see his own blindness, and he felt immense pride as Rosie's Diner, which he now ran, became such a beautiful symbol. The customers in the diner, whether they were first-timers or regulars, stood up and applauded, expressing their sincere respect for Keisha. That moment was truly the most powerful declaration that kindness and goodness would ultimately always be recognized and honored. Keisha looked at the challenge coin, feeling the weight not only from the medal but from the responsibility and sacred meaning it held. To her, this coin represented everything she had gone through, the pain, the struggles, the moments of fighting through doubt, and the courage to continue walking in the darkness without losing hope. She looked up at Colonel Reeves, her voice emotional, yet clear and strong. "Colonel, I never thought I deserved such an incredible honor. I simply did what I believed was right, what my father taught me. I promise to continue doing my best to live up to everyone's expectations." Colonel Reeves smiled gently, bowed his head in respect to Keisha one more time, then stepped back a few paces and stood at attention, saluting her once again, reaffirming the deepest respect he had for her. In that moment, Keisha realized that her life had completely changed. not only because of the esteemed recognition from the military, but also because she now understood more than ever the immense power of silent kindness and compassion. Gently holding the challenge coin in her hand, she knew she would always remember this moment. The moment when all doubts and past pain faded away, leaving only the clarity and infinite power of true, heartfelt goodness. And deep in her heart, she silently vowed to always carry the message that the challenge coin embodied. Semper memor. Always remember. Since receiving the challenge coin from the military, Keisha's story gradually spread throughout the town and beyond, touching the hearts of countless people. She became a role model for quiet kindness, a living symbol of compassion rising above all prejudice. Rosie's Diner was no longer just a simple eatery. It had become a special place where people came to hear Keisha's inspiring story and realize that true kindness never discriminates based on skin color, background, or circumstances. One spring afternoon, as the golden sunlight streamed through the diner's curtains, a group of local students and their teacher walked into Rosie's Diner to meet Keisha. They sat in a circle around her, their eager, youthful eyes waiting to hear directly from the woman whose story was now part of the school curriculum, as a beautiful example of forgiveness and unconditional kindness. A young girl, around 10 years old, raised her hand and asked with an innocent yet sincere voice, "Ms. Keisha, do you feel like a hero?" Keisha looked at her, her eyes gentle and full of love. She shook her head softly, smiling as she spoke in a warm, steady voice. "No, my dear, I'm just someone who knew what it felt like to be hungry, not just physically hungry, but hungry for acceptance and respect. I did those things not to become a hero, but simply to ensure no one else had to suffer the loneliness and pain I once did." Her simple yet heartfelt words deeply moved the group of students and their teacher. The teacher quietly wiped away tears, looking at Keisha with deep respect and gratitude. The children sat quietly around her, reflecting on what Keisha had just shared, realizing that sometimes the truest kindness is the quiet kind, with no expectations in return. Now, those who had once been skeptical, even callous toward Keisha in the past, had become her strongest defenders of the humane message she had shared. Walter Harris, who had once shown cruelty, now stood by her at every community event, frequently sharing his story of profound personal change, as a powerful reminder that anyone can change and start anew, as long as they hold compassion and empathy in their hearts. Rosie's Diner became a familiar destination for schools, organizations, and local groups to hold discussions on kindness, equality, and standing against racism. Here, young people were taught that even the smallest acts of kindness could change someone's life in the most extraordinary way. The small town that had once been steeped in prejudice and doubt had now become a unified community, where people helped and protected each other. The cruel words and discriminatory behaviors of the past had disappeared completely, replaced by compassion, respect, and genuine love. Occasionally, during rare moments of quiet, Keisha would stand silently by the small table in the corner of the diner, the place where Adam once sat, where her story had begun. Each time, she would remember the difficult days, the pain she had endured, but most of all, she remembered the resilience her father had passed on in every lesson he taught her. She knew her father would be very proud of her, and Keisha also understood that the true value of life is not found in wealth or grandeur, but in the small acts that come from the heart. Those things she had quietly done, despite all the pain and pressure. Keisha's story continued to spread from person to person, from generation to generation, as the most powerful lesson about the power of unconditional kindness. Before long, many other towns began to follow Rosie's Diner's example, putting up similar signs with the message, "Here, no one leaves hungry," whether it's physical hunger or the hunger to be accepted. Seeing the powerful spread of this message, Keisha understood even more clearly that her small act of kindness had not only changed Adam's life, but also touched the hearts of countless others. It had become the only flame strong enough to burn away the cold shadows of prejudice and hatred. In the depths of her heart, Keisha always remembered one thing. Every act of kindness, no matter how small or quiet, will eventually be understood and spread, becoming an extraordinary source of strength that heals and soothes the deepest wounds of humanity. And from that moment on, Keisha Davis knew that she had truly found the most authentic meaning in life, a life built on unconditional kindness, boundless compassion and love that never fades. Keisha's story and her journey of overcoming deep prejudices with unconditional kindness had proven a powerful truth. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness carry the greatest power, capable of changing an entire community and erasing the darkness of discrimination. What about you? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a small act of kindness that left a deep impact on your life? Please share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share this video to spread this inspiring message of humanity, and subscribe to our channel to continue following other wonderful stories. Thank you for always supporting and being with us.